Welcome to the Manifestation Lab. This is your host, Kelly Howe. From the grounded science to the mystical and unseen, we're investigating this big experiment we call life and finding what really works when it comes to manifesting a life that sets your heart and your soul on fire. Welcome to the lab. So at the end of 2022, I set an intention. I decided that I wanted to find an expert that specialized in anxiety for children, somebody that knows about tapping, somebody that uses tapping. And right after that, I happened to get on Facebook maybe the very next morning, and I'm not even on Facebook that much anymore. And right across the top of my feed, there was a post from a woman that I had never met that was in one of the EFT groups that we are both in. And she said that she was releasing a book very soon for anxiety in kids. So I instantly reached out to her. I stalked her just a little bit through Facebook and Instagram and sent her an email because I just knew I really wanted to talk to her. Laura Louise Love is a psychologist based out of Australia, and she did just release a book called Anxiety in Kids: Secrets to Freedom. This is long-term strategies for anxiety reduction in children. It's a really incredible book. I want to read you just a little excerpt out of it because even in just the first few pages, I feel like she really, as a mom myself, she really touches a deep space in my heart that I know to be true. And she says, in my work as a psychologist, parents often say all they want is for their child to be happy. I can't emphasize enough that this sets you up for failure as a parent. This is akin to the scene in Finding Nemo when, in his own grief, Nemo's father, Marlin, promises that he will never let anything happen to him. The reality is, try as we might, we cannot shield our children from the ever experiencing discomfort and pain. She also goes on to say, working extensively with families, I have come to know the uncomfortable truth that our kids do not exist in a vacuum. In order to parent our anxious kids, we need to deal with our own anxiety because studies show that anxious parents often have anxious kids. Now, in the very first part of the book, she goes into ways to identify the difference between worry and what's normal and what is truly anxiety. And even just when I first flipped open her book and I was reading it, I was able to identify in myself that I truly have had anxiety probably my entire life. I never called it that. I didn't really like to admit that I was stressed out, and I really internalized all of it. But she says the difference really is when you think about something and you're worrying and you actually feel that visceral physical response, that's when it tips over into anxiety. And, she goes deeper into it. I really think you all are going to love this book. I keep having parents reach out to me, people that I've worked with as clients and also people that have just come across me on Facebook and Instagram and are looking for tools both for themselves because obviously we have all been through a global trauma. I keep talking about that, but it's so important to understand that it really was a global trauma. We have all been through really stressful times. And our kids really, really need us. Even if they're not vocalizing it, if you start to notice that they're fidgeting more, they're having bad dreams, if they just, seem like they're agitated, if they're angry, if they're having outbursts and that's not normal, then they might have some stuff going on inside that they haven't really talked to you about. Laura's book is fantastic. I think everybody should start here. She also has, I think it's a free program on her website, and you can find her at www.lauralouiselove.com. Louise spelled Louise. I also have a middle name. Louise, mine is spelled with an E. So this is lauralouiselove.com. You can also find her on Instagram at LLLpsych, PSYCH. And I know she's on I know she's on Facebook as well. Laura reached out to me recently and passed along a coupon code for us to use. We're going to use ManiLab to get 5% off of her book. And again, you can find that at her website. Laura was so patient with me, by the way, in this interview. We had a little bit of technology back and forth issues. It ended up sounding okay. I did some editing just to kind of block out some of the background noise. But there was a point when I thought it was going to be so bad that the audio was going to be unusable. And she was incredibly patient with my technology glitches or our technology glitches and my brain malfunction during this podcast, because I had just finished up a live event the day before and had a super busy week. And I think my brain was a little bit checked out when we did this interview. But she was extremely patient with me and we had a ton of fun. I think you're really going to enjoy this. So sit back and relax. Welcome to the show from the other side of the world. It's always fun to talk to people so far away.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I was on Facebook and I think I told you I'm like rarely on Facebook anymore, honestly. And I've just happened to pop on. It was like one of the first things that popped up. And I just was like, instantly, I had to reach out because I wanted to talk to you about your book. And I realized that you have some other books and some other programs. And I have so many people reaching out to me. I don't specialize in working with kids. I'm a coach. I'm not a mental health provider in that way. But I have so many clients reaching out that have kids that are struggling with worry and anxiety. And I had truly set the intention, I need to find somebody to talk to. And then it was like, boom, right there. So you got to love that, right?
That's in action there.
Yes, I love it. I love it. So
yeah, kids have been hit hard by the pandemic, of course, like mental health.
yes.
The pandemic hasn't done great things for mental health. And I suppose we have a really stressed society and then stressed families and stressed children. So it's just really had a roll-on effect for little ones, big time.
Yeah, it's been tough, right? And even, I think primarily the people that I work with, it's kind of the situation where like they still had everything they needed. They were safe at home, loving families. But I keep trying to tell them, I'm like, it's still okay and normal that your kids are struggling. The entire world went through a global pandemic, and how people sort of minimalize, well, but like we were okay and we didn't lose our jobs and we didn't lose any family members. And so they're kind of minimizing the struggle that they are going through as adults and as parents, but also kind of looking at their kids and going, but they were okay. And I have to try to tell them, but it's okay if they're still struggling because this was really tough, even if you were safe in your home.
Yeah, and I think we often do minimize, the struggles that we've gone through, especially if we've got a certain level of comfort and, we haven't had a major significant trauma happen. But it is kind of a collective trauma that's happened. And, lockdowns, restrictions, mask wearing, and all this anxiety has been around children in crucial times in their development. For instance, I've got two very little children. And so being able to go to the shops and see people's faces, it's completely covered. You can't see expressions. You've just got scary eyes looking at you all day. And when kids during key moments of their development are learning about social and emotional reciprocity and play, it has had quite an impact. And I think we do minimise just how significant that is. I think we'll see the long-term effects, mental health-wise, of this pandemic roll out over the next, few decades, I reckon.
So talk to me about what are you seeing? You do work with children. Is that right? I mean, you have 3 books. Is that right? 3 books? What are you seeing with the kids right now? How is this affecting them a little more specifically?
Yeah. So, I think anxiety is a huge one. And the severity of what they're presenting with. I've noticed over the past few years, children are just presenting with more severe, more significant issues than they were before. And I suppose it is withdrawing from activities and things like that would have brought them a lot of joy, social connections, things like that. And then also having mum and dad potentially in financial stress or having lost a business or not coping themselves. And, it's often something that's joked about, ISO kilos or isolation kilos or corona kilos and significant drinking and, things that would have brought the parents joy are then cut off at significant amounts of, areas in time. And so that's had a big impact on little eyes and ears watching in our homes about how we cope with stress. And parents have just kind of worked it out as it's been happening and unfolding, but kids have absorbed a lot of that. And it's quite an interesting thing for kids to go through when, as parents, we can't really explain when this thing's going to end. It's just a general level of stress that's added to already stressful development, which is happening for kids. So, for instance, in emergency departments, they're finding that teens with eating disorders are presenting way worse than they would have before. So, for instance, they can stay at home and look up anorexia websites, or get drawn into a lot of those predatorial sort of things because they're maybe disconnected or had disruption to their social connections. So they might be showing up to a hospital near death and really significantly, very underweight, whereas before, people might have gone and reached out for help that little bit sooner. There's also that decreased help seeking, which has happened. So people are unlikely to maybe reach out for help because they don't want to burden the system or go near hospital settings.
Or they're scared. Yeah, they're scared of the hospitals.
Have been left to fester and worsen. And then in my work, I'm just seeing, it blowed out really quite significantly.
That's heartbreaking. That's heartbreaking. Yeah. I don't know what the situation is in Australia. I would imagine that it's the same, but from what I can tell for adults and children, there are more people that need help than there are mental health providers right now, by far.
Significantly.
And so what do you, if you have, I don't know what your practice is like, but where do you send if somebody's, can see that their kids, I loved in your book, by the way, that you really break apart the difference between worry and anxiety. Yeah. And I actually had an aha moment reading that. And I was like, okay, so I legitimately did have anxiety as a kid, because I was an excessive worrier, but I didn't really tell anybody. It was like all inside, but I felt it very deeply in my body. So that was the telltale, right? That if you're feeling it chronically in your physical body, that it's truly anxiety. So I never had like a diagnosis or anything, but I look back and I said, yes, I was an anxious kid. I very much was. So if somebody's struggling, they can't get in to see. Yeah. If they can't get in to see someone, where do we start with these people?
Yeah. So, in Australia, we've got more emergency kind of 24-hour helplines. So things like Lifeline and the Kids Helpline are 24-hour kind of services that the kids can call at any time, and they've got a counsellor to help them. So, and then obviously also presenting to emergency departments. But I guess that's where the idea for this book came about, because our wait lists are so blown out and people are waiting, just sitting on their hands waiting, going, I can't do anything until I see a professional. I thought, well, I've got to kind of write this book and give parents some kind of insight and some strategies so that they can start shifting what they're doing in their homes now and kind of change that relationship with their child. So often we see children referred to psychologists. Fix them. They're the problem. What's wrong with my child? And this book kind of shows a different way. What is the child in your family flagging about areas you might need to heal in your home, in your family, or within yourself? And so starting that process, the sooner you can start that, when you do go and see a psychologist for help, you're much more receptive to the information that you'll be given and more willing to make those changes and already on the journey. So, but I guess the blown out wait lists for help seeking is where the idea from this book came from, because anyone in the world can download it, start that process, and hopefully benefit from some of the knowledge that I've had being a mental health practitioner in the pandemic with kids, which is kind of unique.
Definitely. So I know that you're an EFT practitioner, and I am obsessed with tapping. I just, I found it about 10 years ago, 12 years ago now, and it just completely changed my life. So how did you find tapping? Have you always been doing tapping in your practice, or how did that trickle in for you?
Well, I'm really very fortunate because I went to Bond University when I did my fourth year in psychology, and my lecturer was Dr. Peter Stapleton, who is the lead researcher in Australia in tapping. And so in Australia, it's quite a rigorous process becoming a psychologist. You've got to do, I suppose, what the equivalent of a residency is in America. So you've got to do like 2 years where a senior psychologist kind of watches your practice before you're fully fledged. And so Peter was someone that just had so much energy And even though she works in psychology, which I was kind of like, do I want to be a psychologist or not? It's very heavy kind of work. I don't want that to bog me down in life. She was just vibrant and vital. And I'm like, what is she doing differently? I've got to learn.
I want what she's got.
She's helping people, inspiring people, making a difference, incredible work ethic, and it doesn't seem to bog her down. And so over those 2 years, Peter and I got very, very close, and I got to learn all of that stuff from her and went and attended her trainings. And we even went and saw Nick Ortner together at a Hay House event in Sydney. And then she kind of inspired me to write my first children's book, Huggi the Bear Magic Spots, which I wrote and illustrated to help really little kids kind of learn tapping, an adapted version of it. And we've just been tappers and talking about tapping ever since. So, I'm so lucky to have met Peter. Definitely changed my life in a huge way.
Yeah, that's amazing that you got to actually work with her and know her intimately. I don't know her. I've never met her, but obviously she's like superwoman in the tapping world with all the research that you guys are doing at Bond University. It's just so exciting. So, that's just amazing. Every time I think about what she's done for this industry, it just gets me so excited. I watched her series on Gaia.
Wonderful.
And yeah, I tell everybody, I'm like, just go watch the series on Gaia and she'll explain it all beautifully. But so I want to shift to your family. So we decided, we realized we both are moms of boys. And how old are your boys?
I've got a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. Yeah. So little boys. What about you?
Yeah, I have 12. My baby's 12, 14 and 17. So getting into the teenage. Yeah. Getting into the teenage stuff. And I got to tell you, it's such a different ball game than parenting the littles. And it's like so much easier in some ways. And then all of a sudden you're dealing with more adult type issues and just a whole different ball game as far as challenges. So I don't know. It's interesting. Do you work with teens at all?
Yeah, I work with a lot of teenagers. So it's interesting. Parenting is really hard at the best of times. And a lot of what our kids go through is typical development. Still tricky, pushing boundaries. All your teenage boys would be trying to see who you are in the world and testing limits and doing all that fun stuff, which requires tapping as a parent to cope with.
I do so much tapping. Oh my gosh. Do you tap on your boys?
Oh, yes, I do. Yeah. So my little boys would have a different kind of tapping journey to your kids if yours do tap, but scary dreams, issues with sharing or unfairness, that sort of thing, and worries, scared feelings mainly. Do your boys do any tapping, or are they receptive to it, or do they?
No, they are. Yeah, they really are. But partially because my youngest is the most receptive to it because I started him earlier because that was when I got into it. But yeah, all three of them have tapped at different points, and most of the time they know if they really get into a place where they're struggling and they're just really stressed about something. We've used it for test anxiety. We've used it for sports, athletic performance type anxiety, just getting in ruts and dealing with the emotions of that, or disappointment and that kind of thing. Heartbreak, starting to use it for that kind of thing too. So yeah, they're receptive to it. They don't, I try to not be that irritating mom that's always like, oh, we should go tap on that. I try to let them come to me, but every once in a while I have to kind of step in and say, hey, listen, I can see that you're really worrying, you're struggling with some anxiety. So why don't we just step into my office for a few minutes? And yeah, they're really open and receptive to it. But I know that it's also tough to kind of introduce into the family, or it can be if it's like something that's completely new, because it does look weird and it kind of feels weird. And so where do you, obviously your book is the place to go and start to just kind of start, putting your toe in the water. Do you have programs for parents like online, anything like that?
Yeah, so I've got a Tapping for Kids program. So that's kind of like an introduction for parents, clinicians, therapists, EFT practitioners. Even if you're a teacher or you're just new to it and want to have an extra tool to use to help kids regulate their emotions, that's where I'd kind of start. And obviously Peter Stapleton has amazing and very well-developed programs. I'm only pretty new to getting that out also, work full time and have kids. So trying to balance all those things. But yeah, a few more programs will be in the works soon. So, but the Tapping for Kids program, I've gotten a lot of really great feedback about that from all around the world. But teachers, parents, particularly, really enjoy that because it gives that blend of research and practical and how to actually introduce it to children, which builds on that first book that I wrote, which was introducing that adapted version for really young kids. So, I've just got a bit of know-how in how to give that information to kids so that they're receptive to it and actually start tapping and using it, which is what we want. Yeah.
I will definitely be sending some people your way. Are you an astrology person?
Oh, I do love astrology in my personal time, and I've been into it for a long time. I think probably being into astrology as a youngster probably got me into the psychology space, but I think it's good to think a bit beyond yourself and that there's broader things out there that can be. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Well, it's Mercury retrograde, right? And that's always when the communication gets messed up and fuzzy and the technology, right? And so I did a live event with 2 other women yesterday, and the technology was a disaster yesterday too. And we were all kind of going, you know what? I think there's something to this Mercury retrograde thing.
Mm-hmm.
And, I totally believe in that stuff, but I'm like you. I really, really like the science.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's part of the reason I fell in love with tapping was because it was not only so effective, I could feel it working so very quickly, but over the years, it's like the science just gets stronger and stronger and stronger, So can you speak to that at all? Maybe just kind of give a brief, not even brief if you don't want, but like, how does tapping work? I could give you my version, but I would love to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah, so it's quite incredible tapping, and I think it does really look strange and weird to a scientist-type practitioner. It's like, what on earth is this thing? It looks crazy. And so when I introduce it to other psychologists, I name that up first. This looks really weird. Acupuncture is very well respected as a discipline. Like in Australia, we've got traditional Chinese medicine practitioners that are registered with organisations like AHPRA, for instance. So there is a research base behind meridian points in the body. And so, we go to touch points, instinctively to reduce stress. Like, we can touch the top of our head, when we're not feeling good. We can massage those temples when we're stressed. And so, psychological therapies like talk therapy, cognitive behaviour therapy, exposure are very evidence-based as well. So if you can blend those 2 things together, a body-based component with a psychological component, it's more powerful. And so, it actually helps you feel better. It reduces your stress. It can not rewire your brain, but helps to create new connections in your brain about thinking and helps you take perspective on things. It helps you to unhook from uncomfortable, distressing emotions and helps you think clearly, which then enables you to solve your problems so much better. And I think, that body-based component is really the key difference. And it is a 4th wave of therapy. Dr. Peter Stapleton often talks about that because that body-based component, there's something in that actual tapping in those acupressure points that's helpful in healing too. And I don't know if you've ever just kind of tapped on those points without speaking or not knowing how you feel, and it can unearth things that way because, when we're stressed, our brain kind of locks down and it won't allow us to think clearly, access, the parts of our brain that we need to access in order to, do our best and think well. So it's the combination really, and research around the world, I think there's, it's been researched in 20 countries, a lot of peer-reviewed journals in that space. And so I think even presenting tapping to psychologists looking to that research base is so important. And it is quite an evidence-based tool. And as a psychologist, it doesn't really matter what modality you use as long as you really tune into what it is the client wants and are receptive and have it really client-centered. So doing your own tapping as a practitioner is really important so that you can be present with the issues in front of you that present from your client. And it's a great tool. It's accessible, practical. It helps people to access things that they're not maybe consciously aware of. Thoughts, feelings, memories will pop up seemingly randomly as we're doing this tapping, and it really helps us to access parts of ourselves maybe on a conscious level we don't, ever access. And so the ability for growth, change, behavior change, creating a life that we really love, if we're stuck in a certain locked thinking pattern, is phenomenal. So very highly researched and a really practical and amazing tool. So, and it's helped me to know as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So efficient, right? It's like, I have this problem and now I can feel that it's actually different after that session or after that series of sessions.
That's the biggest thing. It helps you feel better. And as a psychologist, like I was telling you about, thinking, I don't want to be a psychologist if I'm working with problems all the time and I'm going to be dense and, it's going to weigh me down. But as a psychologist doing tapping with clients, you actually feel better. You feel charged.
Mm-hmm.
You don't kind of accumulate that mental baggage. You don't get that very heavy energy, which can often happen when you're maybe doing talk therapy with clients with depression and things like that. So it's a way to protect yourself as well, because the research is showing neural mirroring and even just watching someone doing tapping is actually quite powerful. So as you're doing tapping with your clients, you feel better too, and you're not getting bogged down. So it actually gives your career longevity as well, which is pretty powerful. Yeah,
it's so true. It's so true. I can't imagine doing therapeutic work and not tapping at the same time.
Exactly.
I just can't, I feel like even though it does recharge me, I still have to do a level of, self-care, emotional hygiene myself, just to make sure I don't accidentally absorb anything that I, take anything with me. And it is interesting. And I've noticed this through the years, of course, that it's like when people show up to work on something, it will help remind me of something maybe that was still kind of in there. And it just seems like as I grow and my energy and my issues shift, it's like people show up kind of helping me work through my own stuff. Have you found that too?
Yeah. I mean, we're all human and we all go through struggle. And a huge shift for me, I suppose, happened when I came across some of Brené Brown's work about empathy and sympathy and the difference there. So, we might not know what it is to be in a certain circumstance or environment, but we do all know what it is to feel betrayal, rejection, hurt, despair, anger, frustration, sadness. And so connecting with the feeling that someone else is feeling and accessing that in ourselves is often what we'll do with tapping. So we might not be in the situation they were in, but we know what it felt like to feel alone or disappointed or, the emotion behind it. And so, that's also a great way as a therapist, not to, I suppose, take on too much energetic baggage of your clients, is just connect with the feeling and help then process that feeling in yourself as well if it's triggered something. So doing my own tapping is a huge part of just being able to show up every day and do the important work which is needed at this time. Yeah.
So needed. It is so, so, so needed. Like I said, I was so excited to just have the universe have you pop up in front of me. And then it seems like things worked out pretty quickly and smoothly to get this set up. So I love that. So I do want to shift. I did ask you in my questionnaire before we started about your manifestation processes and what you do with that. And the first thing you said was, do not do resolutions. I love that.
Yeah, but I don't do resolutions. Yeah.
I love it. So talk to me about that. Why don't we do resolutions?
Yeah, well, the research shows that by about mid-March, 80% of people have thrown their resolutions out and have abandoned them. So this cycle of every year, it's, January 1st, all of a sudden I'm going to be a new me. I'm going to never eat chocolate again. I'm going to run like a crazy person every day and go to the gym and not eat any sugar, and then 3 days in, 2 weeks in, completely abandoned it. Probably worse habits now that you've set yourself up for failure. And I think it's just, it's unhelpful for us to set ourselves up in a cycle where we set fanatical kind of expectations of ourselves. We're not good enough. We must do this. And they're often quite fanatical, whatever we would set that's a resolution. It's not really realistic. It's not respectful to ourselves often. It's not really taking into consideration where we're at in our life or how much we've got going on. So intentions is much more where I'm at. So I
love it.
Power words. I think about a bit of a power word for the year, which helps to keep me a bit grounded and focused.
Can I ask, what's your word of the year this year?
It's a weird one, but it came to me. Value is my word.
Oh,
so
I like it.
Yeah, value. It's a different one. I think joy was last year, but value is my word in terms of being able to provide value to people and also to value myself and appreciate and gratitude. It's got a lot of meaning, really, but it's a bit of an interesting one.
I love it. Mine's appreciation this year. And it was cool. I closed my eyes and it was like all fuzzy, and it literally just came towards me and got clear and locked in. And I thought that's really cool. I've never had it do it like that, but yeah, appreciation. I'm sorry I cut you off, but I wanted to know where you were at this year.
So I set that intention, and then you kind of reached out to me. So I'm able to kind of provide some information to people through this platform. So it's
beautiful.
You can create great things.
I love it. I love it. So what is you also mentioned new research at Stanford University.
Yeah, that's really shifted how I kind of create things in my life. So, I've got some disciplines and practices that I do. Go to the gym, I do sunrise yoga, meditate, do tapping. But often I've kind of been taught in this space, in the manifesting space, that you just kind of meditate on how you want things to be. I've got a vision board with how I'd like my life to be and things I want to achieve. But often I think and this is what the research is showing, when we meditate on, envision, and imagine ourselves having achieved a certain goal and that it's already done, thinking from the end, as some call it in the field, that the brain actually thinks we've achieved it and lets it go. And so we stop actively taking action in our lives to make that happen. So it's actually kind of a hindrance. I mean, yes, it's a good thing to imagine so we can see it's possible, but what is more productive for us as well to add to that envisioning is imagining ourselves overcoming obstacles, stuck points, triggers along the path, along the journey to achieve that. So yes, it's great to imagine, what would it be like if I was really fit and active, and imagining yourself that it's possible. That's great. Wow. But just to do, it's already happened, it's achieved, I'm this much slimmer, or my bank account looks like this, we stop then taking steps. What we need to start.
Wow, that is fascinating.
It is.
Oh, I mean,
yes,
I totally believe it. I have, I really have a love-hate relationship with that kind of future visioning work. Mm-hmm. I like it on the side of, if someone can visualize something in the future and actually feel it and be embodied in that, and like feel what it would be like to be there. I like that it gives you that bump of all the healthy chemicals, right, going through our body, and really upregulates our well-being and kind of, amps up how we feel. But if someone's doing it and they don't feel anything, for me, it's just always fallen flat. And so that I feel like backs up my intuitive feel with that, because so many people focus solely on that, and then they never actually focus on the steps or take those steps in between. And so,
and that's what happens. As soon as you imagine yourself there and you've got that voice inside going, but you can't do that. Then you start your tapping, because you're overcoming the mental barriers, the path that you need to take to become that person, and all the resistance that is there to be that person you want to be. So as soon as you kind of maybe do that work, so I often do a vision board, and then I'll go, what is it that I feel straight away? Like if it's something to do with money or success or fitness, what's something that comes up that that tail end kind of thing that goes, well, yeah, that's great, but not for me, it's for other people. Or, I can't do that, my family won't accept it, or, all those things, those barriers that present straight away, and that unconscious stuff is running the program. So it's great to see what's possible, but if we really don't believe it's true for us and we can't get there and it will never happen, that's what's taken power. So starting to tap as soon as you do that that work where you're imagining yourself as you'd like it to be is what helps you make the changes to make it possible. So that's pretty amazing. Yeah. Change how I move it.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. The question I get all the time is, can't I just tap on the positive? Like, why can't I just say the good stuff? So what would be your answer to that?
Yeah, well, and often, like my husband, he's a naturopath and nutritionist, but and so he's very open to this stuff. But often it's like, oh well, we just want to feel good, so we don't want to go there. And I think a lot of people as well, it's like, well, I don't want to go there. It's much better if I just ignore it. But the stuff,
no, I'm done with that. I put that, I dealt with that a long time ago, and I'm like,
yeah,
did you?
You've got to acknowledge that the stuff that's underneath, but maybe it is about acknowledging a portion of it and then moving to the positive. So maybe you're not in a position where you want to unearth all your traumas and start tapping and bring everything up. Maybe you can just acknowledge a little bit of what's maybe not where you want it to be and then move to the positive stuff. Because tapping at the end, when I do tapping on how I want it to be, how I really do want to feel, that feels amazing when you do several rounds.
It does.
And so if you get the balance isn't kind of right and you get too far into the heavy traumatic stuff, then you probably aren't going to want to tap because it doesn't feel good as much as it would. So, yeah, I'd maybe just start with something little that isn't quite like you want it to be. Like, oh, why don't I like that person at work? Or why that rubbed me up the wrong way? I just want to get a bit curious about it and where it might come from, and then move to the feeling good stuff. And I'll work on it again next time. Maybe chip away at it approach rather than do a deep dive into significant trauma.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. People ask me that question all the time. And I like to explain that it's like, as a human, we always have, there's always that other little voice inside of us. Maybe not always, but most of the time there's like maybe 0.5 or 1% of you that's like the yeah, but the tail ender. Right. And so I do have a lot of people that come to me and they just, at first it's kind of uncomfortable to voice. They're like, I don't want to manifest that. I don't want to say it out loud. And I have to explain to them that if it's in the subconscious and it's kind of playing in the background, it's like the elephant in the room, and we're in the room with the elephant and we're just choosing to look the other way and be like, this room is empty. This room is abundant, but there's this like giant elephant that we haven't dealt with. And it feels like if we can just, maybe not dive into our biggest, deepest trauma, but just acknowledge that there is this other side of it. It feels like the emotion and the energy just starts to feel lighter so much faster than trying to just only stay positive 100% of the time.
Yeah. I mean, I don't always tap. We tap often because we want to change how we feel, and we don't particularly like feeling disempowered or distressed, and we can't stop feeling that way. And so tapping is something we use. But if everything's going great in life and you're really owning it and present and enjoy that, I mean, you might not need to tap.
Right. Nothing to tap on.
But if you are in that state of success or having achieved something and the first thought is, oh, how long is this going to last? If there's sabotage happening,
too good to be true. Yeah.
Then it might be good to do tapping. But if you are present and really in the moment enjoying something you've created and in a great space, you might not need to tap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do find that I work with a lot of business owners, and I find that that is one of the things that they finally start to realize is that they're high achieving and they're accomplishing all these things, but they're never actually feeling the fulfillment with it. It's like, oh, if I can just get this next benchmark, if I can do this next big thing, then maybe I can finally be happy. Maybe I can finally, relax. Maybe I can finally have time with my kids. Maybe I can finally afford self-care or, have the time to do it. And that's usually one of those like really sneaky, subtle ways that I can get people to recognize that there is something underneath, that there's like there's just something else going on there, because it's like, no matter what I do, I don't feel it yet,
And it's flagging something deeper, isn't it? We always want to feel like we're enough. And if we're, purging, achieving, trying to do everything to feel enough and never getting there, maybe we've got to start doing something different. And
something different.
That's what tapping helps with. It's not achieving that thing. Maybe we're already whole and complete now. And we put up our happiness.
Right. I know you had a big awakening moment with that. maybe talk to us about your modeling career and how that kind of like shaped your shift of the world, or, you know, shaped your perspective, changed things for you.
Yeah, so I mean, it's pretty unique, I suppose, to be a ex-model turned psychologist, which is a bit different. I've gone from one extreme to the other, completely outward focused, and now completely focused on self-development and the inner self. So complete polar opposite kind of worlds there. But I was quite a nerd when I was in school, and so achieved, you know, I was school captain and kind of got really high marks and things like that. And I was like, oh, okay, well, but beauty is one of those things that it doesn't matter about all of that other stuff. That seems to be what's kind of put in front of us, especially as women, as a complete, fulfilled, happy person. So, and, you know, in the magazines and on TV.
Right. They look so happy in the magazines.
This kind of level of success, I still feel that self-sabotage and that I'm not enough. But if I looked like these women in the media, then I'd have it all. I'd be all together and have everything figured out and be happy. And so, yeah, I became a model. So very rigorous workouts, a lot of purging and eating disordered behavior, just to kind of fit the mold and be what looked like perfect on the outside. And so I did pageants and, you know, traveled all around the country as a model and worked in that space. And so what I found was that, you know, being in, you know, change rooms at the back of pageants, all those girls still didn't feel enough. And I was always 5 kilos from being okay, even when I was at my smallest. So I looked
No matter what.
tiny, tiny dimensions, but I still was like, if only I can lose another 5 kilos, I'll be okay. And it wouldn't matter where I'd get to. And I still didn't feel like I was okay, you know. So then it kind of flagged for me a broader issue. And I suppose a turning point came for me when, so my husband and I fell pregnant, and I was still kind of in that modeling space. And I thought, oh, I need to lose weight so that I don't put on too much weight when I have a baby. And I had a miscarriage. And so, you know, you never know what can contribute to things like that. Right. But I think that kind of experience made me think, okay, I really need to work on something different, achieving in the world, and also then projecting what it looks like on the outside to look glamorous and perfect wasn't kind of meeting my need. I need to do something different and go deeper. And so I suppose that also encouraged me to go down the energy psychology kind of path, was breaking free of all of those things we're taught as women, you know, look perfect on the outside, or look nice and slim and pleasant to everyone, or achieve and be successful. And kind of breaking the mold with some of that has led me completely into this space. So, yeah, it's a unique experience that I've been through with modeling, but, you know, people that look perfect in the magazines definitely don't have perfect lives. So myth busting.
Right. Yeah. You mentioned that you shaved your head too. Was that just kind of like, screw that business, I'm out?
You know, modeling work pays very well. And if you're with agencies and things like that, it's difficult to then go, oh, no, I won't do that. So I thought, okay, I'll start fresh. And I think I was quite obsessed with looking a certain way on the outside, and it was something I definitely thought I could never do. Like as women, a lot of how we feel about ourselves is about our hair and about beauty. So starting completely fresh, and it allowed me to say no to modelling jobs. It's like, oh, I can't do that. I actually have no hair. So it was a great way to, even though I might have been tempted to go back into the modelling world, it was a way to go, no, I'm going to focus on me. I'm going to focus on psychology and go on a completely different journey here. So it was a very
I love that. It's
a process.
Yeah, I love it. I can see that just looking in the mirror every morning, it would be a reminder that, like, nope, I'm on a different path now.
Yeah,
I think it's brilliant.
Even without all the things, I'm okay. Even without hair, it will grow back. It's temporary. And it is a reminder of how ever changing we are, and that things are temporary. We can get so concerned with how we look or how we perform, and we kind of lose that eternal nature of who we are. So it was a good way to ground and center, even though it was an extreme measure. But I do highly recommend it, especially I did donate my hair. I was able to kind of give that away so that people can, you know, that don't have hair can have a wig. So, yeah, it's a very transforming experience to go through. So highly recommend head shaving.
I'm going to put that on my list. I'm not sure I'm quite ready, but
getting a bit obsessed in that external appearances and in that world, it's a good way to reset. Yeah,
I believe that. So it sounds like you have kind of always had some exposure to alternative ideas and alternative therapies and things like that. Maybe talk to me about your grandfather. I'm so interested. He was an MD and a hypnotherapist, and an acupuncturist as well.
Yeah. So my family is from India. So my mum's family is from India, and so my grandpa spoke Hindi and English. He's a medical doctor. He had a career for about 50 years as a GP he had a practice in Sydney. I remember as a kid having issues. And so my grandpa, who was a trained clinical hypnotherapist and acupuncturist, I often remember he'd have a green dot and a red dot on the roof and then do a bit of meditation and hypnosis with me about whatever I was stressed or anxious about. And at the time, I always, would wriggle around and think, oh, I'm not doing this right. And what's Grandpa making me do? But it really did solidify for me the power of the mind and how to calm, and that the mindfulness space was so significant in terms of its impact on our physical health. And even though my grandpa was a GP, the power of the mind, meditation was such an important part of his practice. And he never kind of lost sight of that. And so the impact of stress, for instance, on how it is we feel in our bodies and contributing to medical conditions and things like that, he was a big believer in that. So, and quite a trailblazer for back in that time period.
That's what I was thinking when I saw that. I was like, wow.
Yeah. And I think, coming from an Eastern background, that was a lot easier for him because that's just, the way that things were in India. So
embedded in the culture, yeah.
Some of that to Australia. So I'm very lucky to have that kind of grandpa.
I love it. If he was still practicing, I would be like his biggest client. I'm looking for someone like that. I'm looking for your grandpa. I'm looking for that doctor.
Yeah. And I think it's what people are seeking now. As a kid, I thought, oh, what's grandpa making me do? Looking at the dot, doing the meditation.
Right. This is so weird.
Weird. But now, I think people are really seeking that out. It's like medicine alone without taking into account stress, how you feel about yourself, beliefs, and mental health is it's lacking if it's not taking into account that holistic picture. And so even though it would have appeared a bit strange and different back when my grandpa was practicing, now I think people are really hungry for that holistic approach to wellness. Yeah.
They are hungry for it. It feels like even in obviously the last couple of years, but the change over the last 10 years, I feel like has been drastic. It's happening really quickly. And I think it's so exciting. And I think hungry is the perfect word for it. And I feel like people are struggling more, and that hunger combined with it, I think we're going to see rapid change over the next few years. That Mercury retrograde is killing me. I just did that live event yesterday, and I feel like I never have this much trouble getting my words out. The struggle is real. It's all good.
Go in cycles and things, don't we? We're not always
right
on 100% of the time. And that's
right.
okay.
Right.
Yeah.
I know. I did a post about that recently where I was like, you know what? Not everything is going to be, the A+. Sometimes it's going to be a C, and that's okay too. Gosh, I've come a long way, because that in the past, like if I had done this maybe 5 years ago, definitely 10 years ago, I was so still stuck in that perfectionism that like, if I had fumbled one little word, I would have had full body fight or flight. Like I would be heart racing, tense muscles, palm sweating, almost unrecoverable. So it's a testament to doing that body work and really just finding the root cause of what is that all about?
You'd know that book by Bessel van der Kolk, The Body Keeps the Score. I'm sure you know all about that. It is true. The body does accumulate all that stuff, doesn't it?
It really does. It really, really does. And just that, that book was really life-changing for me too, because again, I really like to understand the science of it. I'm very woo-woo, I can go out there as far as anybody, but I have to be grounded in but like, I really do want to understand, I'm fine with, I truly believe that lots of things that don't make sense to us, science will explain at some point. It just hasn't caught up. We're not there yet. We don't have the technology for it. But yeah, I mean, the body does keep the score. And I think if we can kind of onboard the rational, like, the part of us that's very skeptical and, rational, it's like, if I can read the science, it gets me onboarded to try the woo-woo stuff and go deeper with it.
It's a bit more credibility, I suppose, isn't it? So
yeah.
Rather than us just at a belief level thinking something's great, actually having that research behind it and the credibility and the endorsement kind of gives it that much more stick-with-itness, or it gives it that much more power. Yeah.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree. Yeah. And I do need that. Some people don't need as much of it, but I do. I'm like, I need that oomph from the science side. I really do. What does that feel like in the psychology world right now? Maybe going to conferences that aren't like body-based conferences, maybe people that haven't heard of tapping. Is there an opening in psychology? Are people starting to embrace these body-based techniques a little bit more?
I think EMDR, if you know what that is, has gained a lot of traction in, the last little while in the psychology space. And so that might have been thought of to be super woo-woo back in the day, but now seeing EMDR show quite significant benefits to lots of different client groups. And, that is something that involves a bit of body-based kind of work. That people are now open that something that appears really strange and odd can actually help to heal the mind and the body on a level. So I think EMDR has done a lot of great things for tapping, in the sense that it's opened people up to try new things, and that maybe, binaural kind of methods and body integration kind of work can really show phenomenal benefits. So there's an openness there, and there's a real in the psychology world. So the other week I led some psychologists in showing them tapping, and some of the feedback initially was, I've been one of those psychologists that, would never do something like this, that's thought it's really no way, that's not evidence-based and can't make you feel better. But then actually trying it and then learning about it and you feel better, you go, maybe I need to find out a little bit more. There's just a chink in the armor there.
Right.
About it.
I like it.
So, yeah, there is an openness, and I think a lot of that has come from, I suppose, the publicity and how well-known EMDR is, and that's often in the media. I think Prince Harry did something about EMDR recently.
Did he?
Yeah, and so there's a lot more knowledge about that, and so tapping is also similar. And so there's that receptivity in the psych world as a result. But there still is resistance.
Sure.
Yeah, and I suppose you don't need to be a registered psychologist in order to do tapping or train in it. So it's not a protected little thing just for the psychology world. So there's a bit of stuff to do with that. But in time, I think it'll really take over as an essential tool for every psychologist. That's my hope anyway.
I think it will. I really, really do, because I think if you get people to experience it or just talk to someone that's had an experience with it, you can't deny. I mean, it's just so powerful. And, the thing that I hear over and over again, and, I don't work with big T trauma at all. Like I said, I'm working with business owners, and we're working through blocks to like making money, which of course can lead to bigger traumas, but that's not my zone. It's not in my scope of practice, but where was I going with that? I'm killing myself today. Just all over the place. I'm so sorry. Oh gosh, Kelly, get your life together. I was getting ready to make a really good point too.
It'll come to you.
I know it will. Oh no, I know what I was going to ask. So is EFT is it considered evidence-based yet? Have we gotten to that point that it's, accepted by the American psychological, or the Australian?
Well, it is evidence-based tool. However, I suppose it's not something you can go and claim Medicare for at this stage. But a lot of work is happening behind the scenes. It keeps getting submitted for that to change. And Peter Stapleton is doing a lot of work in that kind of space. And I suppose the research, that's where the research comes in handy, because I suppose they have feedback, and there's a bit of a process to get Medicare. I don't know if you guys have that in America. You probably don't know what that is, actually. So,
we do. Yeah, we do. We do. Yeah.
To go to a psychologist with a, or your GP, get a mental health care plan, see a psychologist, and then you get a rebate. So being able to kind of go specifically for tapping isn't existent yet in Australia, but in time, that will change.
Not here that I'm on.
Yeah, in a matter of time, I think that'll change, especially as the research is growing in that space. So my hope is that people will be able to go to their GP and say, can I go see a psychologist to get tapping on this? And they'll go, okay, yep, here's your referral, here's your health plan, and that'll make it accessible for people, and that'll be so much more integrated into health in general. It'd be just great to see everyone tapping in health settings, wouldn't it?
Yes. Yeah. And I think that people, unfortunately, don't if insurance doesn't cover it, or if Medicare doesn't cover it, unfortunately, people think, oh, it must not be effective, or it must not be real, or, you know what I mean? It's like it creates a level of resistance that doesn't need to be there. And I think once we get there, that's going to open up so many people to trying it, because, well, if insurance covers it, it must be effective, right?
Yeah, it's validated for the tool, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, and at that belief level, like, you've got that credibility and that endorsement then, which will help it kind of spread to the masses, I hope. Yeah.
I know. It's really exciting.
Almost.
We're getting there. We're getting there. You doing your work is all a big part of that. And
do our bit to shift and make this change. So even though it's hard.
It's lovely. Yeah, it's lovely. Well, I so thank you for doing this. And yeah, and I apologize that my brain has been really sketchy today.
It's been perfect.
Wow, this has been fun. Yeah. So if somebody, how can they reach you if they wanted to try your program that you've got, maybe find your books? Where's the best way to find you?
So hop onto my website, lauralouiselove.com. So it's just my full name.com. And yeah, everything's available on my site. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for doing the work in the world that you do. And it's been so lovely to connect. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Kelly.